Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, stood backstage at the Pan Pacific Auditorium in Los Angeles, buzzing with energy and nerves. It wasn't just any show, it was a night when the ordinary rules of rock and roll would shatter. Hollywood stars, big shots, and even folks from the general public filled the auditorium. Elvis knew this crowd was unlike any other. They were there to witness something unique, something they'd never seen before from their favorite singer. Elvis had worked himself up for this moment. He had been practicing his moves, determined to show everyone the real Elvis Presley, not the caricature some had painted. His performance was going to be raw, powerful, and unapologetic. As he stepped onto the stage, the crowd's anticipation was palpable. He shimmied across the stage in his flashy gold jacket, his legs and arms moving wildly like a man possessed. He dropped to his knees, then sprang up to grab the big stuffed dog mascot, Nipper, as if in a fervent prayer. Critics called it bizarre, even mocking, saying he seemed to be humping the dog, but Elvis had a reason. He wasn't trying to shock, he was demonstrating his control and energy, wanting to connect with the massive audience in front of him. Backstage before this electrifying performance, Elvis had faced a different kind of storm. Bing Crosby, a legendary singer, had been praising him publicly. But behind the scenes, Elvis had learned of Frank Sinatra's scathing critique of rock and roll. Sinatra called it a rancid-smelling aphrodisiac, a brutal, ugly, desperate, vicious form of expression. Elvis had heard these words often and felt the sting, but he remained defiant. He respected Sinatra as a performer, but disagreed with his views on rock and roll. Elvis saw it as a legitimate form of expression, one that should be judged on its own merits, not compared to outdated musical forms. Elvis tried to stay calm, reminding himself and others that everyone has their own musical preferences. "There are gonna be people who like you, and people who don't like you," he'd say. "You can't please everybody. Some people hated Jesus and he was the perfect man." With a shrug, he prepared to face the music, literally and figuratively. The Los Angeles Police Department Vice Squad had even warned him that he might face legal trouble for his provocative stage antics. But Elvis, the king, wasn't one to back down. After the show, Elvis retreated to Graceland, his home in Memphis. With the movie plans falling through, he spent his time relaxing and enjoying the company of friends. He rented films for them to watch, organized impromptu games, and even let them ride at the fairgrounds. Despite occasional mishaps and injuries, these were carefree times. Elvis took pride in providing for his friends, making sure they felt welcome at his home. As the year drew to a close, Elvis found solace in simpler moments with his mother, Gladys. They would sit in the quiet dining room, away from the chaos of his celebrity life. Gladys, though she couldn't fully grasp the extent of Elvis's fame or his ambitions, always tried to offer guidance. She suggested reading the Bible daily, believing it held answers to life's challenges. Elvis would listen, finding comfort in their conversations. It was during one such moment, just before Christmas, that he learned he had received his induction notice for military service. The news was a shock. Both the U.S. Army and Navy offered him special status, suggesting he could entertain troops. But Elvis's father, the colonel, insisted he serve like any other soldier. Elvis agreed, proud to serve his country, wanting to be treated just like any other GI. He chose the Army, accepting a deferment until late March 1958. This decision marked a new chapter, one that would test his resolve and change his life forever. Elvis's journey was far from over. As he prepared to embark on this new path, he carried with him the lessons of his tumultuous yet exhilarating year. The king of rock and roll was about to face his most significant challenge yet, one that would define him in ways he could hardly imagine. As Christmas approached, a heavy cloud settled over the family. Despite the mountains of gifts Elvis gave, it was a bleak holiday. Gladys, his mother, was unwell. She usually wore her housecoat and slippers, spending most of her days listening to her son's EP of hymns. But now she was often in tears, fearing he might be sent to fight overseas. Her fear wasn't unfounded. Elvis's cousin, Junior Smith, had recently returned from Korea. He was shell-shocked and told everyone he was unfit to serve, but the shadow of war loomed large. For Elvis, this uncertainty ended with his 23rd birthday. The need to escape the looming reality of war fueled an intense desire to let off steam. He created a wild game called War, involving fireworks and two teams throwing lit fireworks at each other. This was dangerous but thrilling, showing a new side to his personality. He was also becoming more reckless with his money. Ignoring Vernon's warnings, Elvis started giving out $100 bills to anyone around him. Even a delivery boy received one for a simple task. To Elvis, money was meant to be shared, a gift in itself. "I'm lucky to give," he'd say, genuinely believing that sharing his wealth brought him joy. But this generosity bordered on mania, almost as if he felt guilty for having so much, especially after enjoying his music. With the army calling, everything sped up. Hal Wallis and Paramount wanted a new movie fast, and RCA needed new recordings. Right after his birthday, Elvis took a train back to Los Angeles to start recording. His next movie, based on Harold Robbins' book, was quickly adapted to fit his image. The title changed from A Stone for Danny Fisher to King Creole after Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller wrote a song by that name. Recording took place in New Orleans, with a Dixieland band joining Scotty and Bill. However, Leiber and Stoller suddenly left, clashing with the Colonel again over a musical idea. They never worked with Elvis again, though they went on to great success without him. Elvis returned to Los Angeles to film King Creole, directed by Michael Curtiz and featuring Walter Matthau and Dolores Hart. The movie was a success, especially with its location shots in New Orleans and a catchy song with Kitty White. But just as his career seemed to be soaring, it abruptly ended. Back in Memphis, Elvis bought new records and spent his last night of freedom with friends and girls at the Rollerdrome. On March 24th, he went to the draft board with his family and friends. After medical checks and a loyalty oath, he was officially Private Presley, US 533107661. His army pay of $78 a month would go to charity. Outside, the Colonel handed out King Creole balloons, but Elvis kept his emotions in check. The transition to army life was swift. More photographers and reporters followed him to Fort Chaffee, Arkansas. There were vaccinations, intelligence tests, and finally, the symbolic haircut, which surprisingly didn't make him look any less handsome. Elvis, now 5 feet 11 inches without his signature sideburns, handled the press like a pro. He spoke carefully, always presenting himself as an ordinary American trying to do his duty. The Colonel's influence was clear. Elvis was determined to be a good soldier, understanding how much the Colonel had done for him. Though the Colonel managed Elvis's business affairs, Elvis seemed to trust him completely, even if it meant putting his talents on hold. In this new chapter, Elvis's loyalty and gratitude to the Colonel overshadowed his own ambitions. The line between being employed by Parker and working for him blurred, showing a complex dynamic that would shape Elvis's future. Elvis's time in the army was very tough on him. Even though he was famous, being in the military was a big change. He was sent to Fort Hood in Texas for basic training. This was the hardest part of his life, but he tried to hide how he felt. Elvis had always been used to being the center of attention, but now he felt lonely, even among his friends. He tried to make friends by being nice to everyone in his barracks. He bought them food and clothes. He wanted to fit in and not make mistakes in front of everyone watching. Elvis loved challenges, so he was proud when he finished a hard march in the heat without stopping. He even lost some weight, which made him look good. Elvis had a few people who helped him through this hard time. A kind soldier named Bill Norwood let him use his home to call his family. Another man, Eddie Faddle, found Elvis at the base and talked to him when Elvis was feeling very sad. Elvis told Faddle he felt forgotten and worried he wouldn't be famous anymore after his service. During his free time, Elvis visited his family. His visits made him feel a little better, but he still felt the draft was the end of his career dreams. A furlough or a break from duty helped him. He drove home and bought a new car, enjoying some freedom before going back to work. The Colonel, Elvis's manager, wanted to protect Elvis's fame by not releasing new music while he was in the army. RCA Records, his company, disagreed. They wanted to keep releasing music so fans wouldn't forget him. After much discussion, RCA let Elvis record just one night at the studio. That recording session was amazing. Elvis wore his army uniform and recorded 5 songs that became huge hits. These songs sold millions of records. The musicians who helped him were very skilled and they worked fast. Even though the Colonel wasn't happy because the band sounded too loud, Elvis was thrilled with the results. The Colonel sometimes asked RCA to change the mix of the records later, but Elvis liked how they sounded. He wanted his voice to blend with the music, not stand out too much. Even though the Colonel didn't always agree, he usually let Elvis have his way with the recordings. Elvis's army service ended, and he returned to music. He knew that being in the military had changed him, but he was ready to continue his career. The experience taught him a lot about discipline and resilience. Though it was hard, it also helped him grow as an artist and a person. Elvis was more determined than ever to make music that would touch people's hearts, no matter what challenges he faced.